¿Qué más, mijos lindos? That's such an Ecuadorian expression. Today I'm gonna be reacting to two polyglots speaking Spanish because that is my native language, and I think it's a really interesting thing to do. So I'm gonna be doing that. One of them is Robin on the left right there, so that's Robin McPherson, and then on the right that is Lindie Botes. I'm really hoping I'm pronouncing her last name right because it took me like 10 minutes to find someone who would dare pronounce it. So I really hope that's right. Yeah, I mean, it's pretty interesting. Like, just to give you a bit of background from the research that I did, Robin speaks 9 languages. I don't know in particular which ones they are. I just know that, for instance, Italian is one of the languages that he speaks. That is the one that I'm learning. But unfortunately, in this interview, they spoke only Japanese, French, Spanish, and Mandarin, which I guess the ones that overlap between both of the languages that they speak. So Spanish is the only one that I can give my critique on. And just to be clear, like, these guys are polyglots. I'm not a polyglot, I'm just learning languages, and I'm very obsessed with the process of learning language, particularly through immersion. But that's something to talk about in another video. Particularly, I would be really interested to see their methodology and their advice on language learning. But so far, I just want to see how their Spanish is and give you some of my thoughts on that. I can imagine this must be a polyglot's worst nightmare, so if I ever make a video like this speaking another language, I mean, I just totally see why it would be scary, like a native reacting to what I'm saying. So this is not a critique on how good they are as polyglots or how good they are in general at languages, because Spanish is just one of the languages they speak. It might be one of the weak points for one of them. So yeah, this is not a reflection on how good they are in general at language learning or in their other languages, just Spanish. So let's jump straight into it. Okay, here we go.
Que la español.
Sí,
Podemos
vamos.
hablar en español un poquito, pero estoy bastante principiante de mi español. Has estudiando el francés por muchos años, pero el español quizás unos meses, un año, creo. ¿Y tú? Con todo. ¿Hace cuánto el español?
Sí,
So very first impressions on Lindie's Spanish. Well, first we can tell that that is a Spanish from South America, or I see a flag in there of Mexico, so probably she's learning Mexican Spanish, or, you know, just South American general Spanish, Latino, as we call it, right? She just said, ¿hace cuánto el español? But what she was trying to say is, ¿hace cuánto tiempo estás aprendiendo español? Which would mean, like, how long have you been learning Spanish for, right? She just kind of like stopped midway through the sentence. She probably couldn't recall exactly how to say it, and well, you can see her thinking, and then, well, Robin just decided to start talking, so she couldn't correct herself. So yeah, I mean, definitely she seems to have a couple of gaps on her vocabulary, which stops her a bit. Everything was pretty decent, like, you know, the pronunciation was pretty good, but she did get quite stuck thinking, and she did make quite a few mistakes, to be honest. And she even confused it with French, which I guess that's what happens when you learn so many languages, so fair enough, right? So yeah, now let's listen to Robin speaking.
entonces sí, empecé con el español cuando tenía 16 años, pero fue algo muy largo.
Right, so far Robin's Spanish is incredible. You can see again from the flag that they put in there, it's Spain/Mexico. So obviously his Spanish is more from Spain. That is the accent that he's acquired. He doesn't have tons of mannerisms from Spain, or it's like a really hardcore Spanish accent from Spain, but it is obviously you know, like from Spain. So yeah, fair enough. Pick the other side. Robin is fine. We the Latinos are fine with it. We're not fine with it. Just kidding. But yeah, no, Robin's everything is really good. He's very fluent. You can tell that he can perhaps like already think directly in the language without having to translate to English, which is his native language. He would be totally fine in a Spanish-speaking country. I can also imagine that his level of comprehension must be really high. Very fluent. Like, this guy is incredible in Spanish, actually.
Me mudé en los Estados Unidos y bueno, había mucha gente de Argentina, de El Salvador, de México. Y fue mi primera experiencia, no solamente hablando un idioma extranjero, pero también mezclando con otra gente de una otra cultura. Yo estaba, no estaba un americano o una persona de Inglaterra que hablaba español, yo estaba uno de ellos.
Well, okay, so here is a common mistake. He said, yo estaba uno de ellos, right? He was trying to say I was one of them. He said yo estaba, but what he wanted to say was like yo era. But that's a really common mistake, and I guess that's a big confusion about learning Spanish because we have two different types of verbs, ser y estar, which in English is just like to be. But yeah, like, I mean, fair enough, I guess that must be really hard for English speakers, so I don't blame him for that mistake. Again, it's totally understandable. It's not like he was saying something that is the opposed meaning of what he meant. It's still completely understandable, and as a Spanish speaker listening to him, we're talking face to face, I would just let it pass. I would be like, fair enough. I wouldn't be like, I don't know what you're saying. So yeah, fair enough, a small mistake, nothing too bad.
En un tiempo mi italiano fue a un nivel más alto que español. Pero tengo mucho menos experiencia con italiano. Mucho menos. Y
Por
entonces...
Alright, so, well, Lindie hasn't talked much yet, but I do want to point out this really interesting use of the word por ejemplo. Because por ejemplo means, like you see in the subtitles, it does mean for example or for instance. But that's a really interesting choice of words, and my guess would be she didn't translate that from English, because I don't think it's too natural to ask someone like, for example? Is it? I don't know, I might be wrong. Maybe she's thinking in another language and she translated it to Spanish. I really don't know what her thought process was for that. It's not wrong, it's just not something that a native would say in that situation. At least, that's the way I see it. I don't know, I'm kind of confused. That really threw me off. I guess what I would say, for instance, would be like, en serio, como que? Which would mean like, really? Like what? I guess that would be a much more natural way to say that in Spanish. Again, like she just said two words, I'm not gonna condemn her for that. But because she hasn't spoken too much, I thought it was interesting to see that little detail. But yeah, well, let's give her more chance, like that's not fair, so let's keep going.
Pero no tenía muchas experiencias en la vida. No tenía mucha experiencia hablando italiano con otra gente.
Sí.
Pero español, mi nivel fue un poco más alto, pero tengo muchas experiencias en la vida con español. Entonces, yo olvido italiano muy rápidamente, pero español es un poco más fuerte.
Well, okay, again, I'm just very, very impressed with Robin's Spanish. Really good. Like he's even communicating quite interesting storyline. Like I actually got quite lost on his Spanish, and I just paid attention to the words he was saying, and I totally stopped paying attention to his actual grammar and his way of speaking. And I guess that's the ultimate level of fluency, where you're speaking to a native, and the native does like even forgets that this is not your first language. So I'm really impressed. It's really, really good. He made a couple of mistakes here and there, but again, nothing even worth pointing out.
Yo confundo las palabras básicos como y, las palabras como like interjections. Es muy fácil
Sí.
de confundir en español y francés.
Sí.
Again, well, Lindie's accent is pretty good. Honestly, her accent is her best part of her Spanish. He did make quite a few mistakes, to be honest. She actually confused the articles of like this is la botella, which in English obviously is the bottle, but in Spanish everything has a gender, as you might be aware of. So this is la botella, no el botella. And she confused those quite a few times. Like she meant to say a word with the wrong gender a couple of times. And the other thing, well, it was just her wrong use of the word confundir, to confuse. She said confundar, which isn't a word, but it's close enough. Again, nothing too crazy. Yeah, she hasn't spoken much, so hopefully she'll speak more in a bit.
Si solo aprendí el idioma, pero no tengo esta relación, sí, no tanto. ¿Y tú?
¿Cómo? Sí.
¿Y
yo?
tú cuando, por ejemplo...
Well, that mix-up that they both had, like, it's just something that happens to humans, so that's not really a reflection on their Spanish, I would say, like, and you, and y tú, like, that just happens.
Mi nivel de coreano muy bastante alto. Y
Sí.
así que no es muy difícil de confundir los idiomas, pero sí hay alguien que estudié, no sé, coreano y japonés lo mismo tiempo. Es más fácil de confundir los dos idiomas.
She does seem to struggle with her vocabulary quite a bit. She did know the word, like she knew it, but it does seem like her brain is working pretty hard, perhaps at translating or trying to consciously recover information. And this is one of the things that I'm really interested in, like the methodology of immersion, acquiring a language, learning a language. through listening and reading a lot of the language is something that can help you develop that intuition to just speak the language without having to think much about it, without having to translate, or without having to do a lot of conscious effort. And I guess my guess would be, and I really don't know, is that Lindie hasn't gotten into this like fully immersive approach. Perhaps she studies a lot more grammar and that kind of stuff. I would have to watch more videos to really know this, but yeah. Also, that sounds from what they're saying. I think Robin has been studying Spanish for way longer, so that's perhaps not a fair comparison. But yeah, you know, pretty interesting. Let's keep listening to Lindie.
¿Qué? Caban?
Caban?
Si? Caban, oh, je parle français maintenant. Oh, je peux pas.
It's difficult.
Well, I think she's quite nervous. She's thinking about concepts in other languages. She's thinking in French because probably French is a lot stronger for her. And yeah, it's kind of tricky because even though, like, again, her pronunciation is really good, and sometimes she would even say like the right words. Like she would use words that are technically correct, but that a native wouldn't say, you know? So she's done that quite a bit.
Hay palabras similares, pero y la gramática también. Pero, ¿por qué has estudiado? No sé, I don't know how to use the past tense in Spanish, by the way.
He estudiado.
He estudiado, gracias.
Okay, yeah, so fair enough. Like the first sentence she said actually was very correct. She sounded natural. And then I think she just gets nervous at times. And well, right now she just switched to English and she actually talked about how she doesn't really know the past tense. Fair enough.
Exactamente, sí. Cuando yo estaba aprendiendo el italiano, mi español no fue a un nivel alto tampoco. Y yo confundía todo el tiempo. Fue muy difícil para mí de separar italiano y español. Pero yo sabía que, bueno, no hace nada, ¿no? Es como, ok, con el tiempo, cuando mi nivel en los dos idiomas es más y más alto, voy a confundir menos y menos. Y fue la realidad. Entonces, sí, es muy interesante.
Sí. 好，我们可以讲中文一点点。太难。
Okay, I don't understand Mandarin, so there we go. Nice, that was fun. Okay, yeah, that subs there. So actually Robin made a couple of mistakes in there, but again, like what I was saying before, he didn't use the exact words. For example, he said fue la realidad. He meant to say like that was the reality of the situation, right? So he actually meant to say esa fue la realidad. That was the reality. That's how you would say that in Spanish. But again, like he didn't get stuck. He kept flowing. That it was still his point. He totally got it across. It was very clear what he meant to say. So there was no problem there. So that is one of the biggest things to take away from Robin. Like his Spanish isn't perfect, even though I can tell it's not his native language. Still, like it's very, very fluent. If I would come across him on the street here in Ecuador, I'd be very, very impressed. But yeah, again, like the most important thing that he does and the biggest thing to take away is that he doesn't let the mistakes or the things he doesn't remember how to say correctly stop him. He still gets his point across and doesn't let those little mistakes stop him or throw him off. Lindie, on the other hand, unfortunately, she didn't manage to get her point across all the time. She just got too self-aware, self-conscious of using the correct words, and when she didn't know the correct word, that would really throw her off. So that is the biggest problem with her Spanish. But I guess, you know, a lot of more immersion, just listening to a lot more Spanish, whether that's watching TV shows, movies, reading books, that would really help to really take it to the next level. Because honestly, like her pronunciation is really, really good. It's just like perhaps her lack of vocabulary, or actually listening a lot more what native speakers sound like through a lot of immersion, you know, like a lot of immersion, like hundreds of hours of just listening and immersing in the language. I think that is really what can take a level of, you know, like Lindie's Spanish to really the level of Robin, perhaps. And I would have to dig deeper into their methodologies, but my guess would be that Robin has immersed a lot more than Lindie. So I guess that is really the biggest difference between them two. And obviously, like the amount of time. Robin did say that he spent like 10 years. For me, this just kind of confirms that immersion is the way to go if you want to get really fluent. So immersion is definitely my biggest passion with language learning and the method that I believe in the most. So hopefully we'll expand more on that in future videos. And if you have any requests to, you know, maybe review someone else's Spanish, another polyglot Spanish, or anything like that, or review someone else's video, I'd be really interested to do that. So let me know if that sounds interesting to you in the comments, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye. Yeah.